After 74 years, 5 months and almost 3 weeks, Prince Charles is finally crowned King Charles III.
Now what?
I'm not a royal fan, but I was a fan of the Queen because to me she was kind of fascinating and she did her job without complaining and without big scandals to the end, unlike pretty much everyone else in her family. And speaking of, I'm not a fan of Harry and Meghan, which I already have mentioned once or twice. But now Charles is at the center of attention. Next to the Queen, or Diana, or William, or Harry, this stiff guy with the big ears never made much of an impression to me. He didn't seem as interesting or likable as everyone else. But in the last few years, I have changed my opinion, which doesn't seem to be very common nowadays.
All of this comes as young Britons are increasingly turning against the monarchy. One poll found that only a third actively back it. That poll, by the way, also asked, do you think King Charles is in touch or out of touch with the experiences of the British public? And I don't know, is this guy out of touch? This guy?
Don't get me wrong, Charles has made mistakes, a lot. And sometimes he was just an idiot. Something he, maybe for the very first time, publicly demonstrated when he and Diana got engaged and were asked if they were in love.
Of course.
Whatever in love means.
And of course he cheated on Diana with Camilla, which not only wrecked his marriage, but also his whole reputation. And to this day, many hold it against him. Or maybe again, because with the 5th season of The Crown, a whole new generation got to hate him. But I think that's a bit unfair. As big as his mistake was, it's not everything he is. Charles waited longer than any other British prince for the throne. In 1948, he was born into a world where shortly after World War II, the royal family was adored by the British people. It was a world where he was closer to his nanny than he was to his parents.
When the Queen came to the throne, it was a man's world. The 1950s, post-war, there was a real demand for women to go back to the home. This is a problem because the Queen, she is head of state and she also has 2 children, so there are a lot of demands upon her. If you had children and you had a career, you pretty much had to pretend they almost didn't exist because that was the job of a wife.
It was also a world where boys weren't supposed to be shy or sensitive, which Charles was. They were supposed to be strong and just do what they were told, which Charles did. Even though he was the future king, he wasn't often allowed to make his own decisions.
Ironic.
No matter if it came to what schools he attended, like Gordonstone, a charming place where apparently every day started with a run and with a cold shower. Or of course when it came to the woman he married, because he wasn't allowed to marry the one he loved. And with that we're back with Diana, who was 20 when they got married, while Charles was 32. Today we'd call that problematic. But it is of course kinda hard to find a woman his age with the right background and no past, as in a perfect virgin. Something that Camilla couldn't possibly keep up with. But apparently Charles did try and at least at times did have feelings for Diana, which she said so herself. The problem was that they were completely opposites, which someone might have noticed if they would have met more than only 13 times before they got engaged. Diana was passionate and emotional, Charles was shy and more reserved, and so she quickly outshined him in the public, and Charles got jealous. And then they both had affairs, as we know. But only Charles was the bad guy, and I don't really agree with that. At least not completely. Of course it was wrong of him to cheat, and nothing against Diana, she was an incredible woman, she was the people's princess. But she was also human and not a complete saint. And of course it is unfair that Charles and Camilla got their happy end while Diana did not. But I still don't see them as villains. I think it was all an incredible tragic mess. And it also makes people forget what good Charles has done. For one, he has learned from his past. He supports and is close to his sons.
Charles has tried very hard to be a good father to those boys. And the relationship with William seems to be very much in sync. With Harry, it's a work in progress.
Of course. Of course. Of course.
But he still calls Harry his darling boy, even after Harry happily threw his family under the bus.
Take that fake apology and shove it right up your hairy mouth.
And during his wait for the throne, Charles didn't sit around like a happy little nepo baby. He found a purpose. Since the 70s, he's passionate about climate change and nature, and in this, he truly was ahead of his time. And with his Prince's Trust, he has helped many young people from difficult backgrounds.
What I hope we've been able to do is to help some people's dreams to come true.
When I was a teenager trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, acting, the theatre, storytelling was an aspiration, but there was no real path for me. The Prince's Trust came along as a means of helping me fund going to join the National Youth Music Theatre. Being part of that production led to me going to drama school and led to the career I have now.
But yes, sometimes he is out of touch. Charles isn't perfect, and this video isn't meant to only praise him. And yes, the British monarchy isn't necessary. I understand when someone in the current economic who has to decide whether to buy food or to heat their home isn't thrilled about them. I'm just stating my opinion about Charles as a person, and I think he is modern for a royal. And I also think he has the potential to be a good king.
Well, you know what you're getting, because he's been practicing for a bit.
And to be completely honest, the crown could have landed on much worse heads than his.
I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat.